Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Pond Hunter broadcast from the Under the Sea radio show on Blog Talk Radio. The Pond Hunter, in the pursuit of all things aquatic. Take a look into the world of koi ponds, water gardens, and the lifestyles of the aquatically obsessed. Meet the pros, hobbyists, and cover some no-nonsense pond advice straight from the field. The Pond Hunter, in the pursuit of all things aquatic. Here's your host, koi pond and water garden expert, Mike Gannon.
Hey, everybody. Hi. Welcome to the Pond Hunter radio broadcast, episode 49. That's almost 50. And I'm your host, Mike Gannon, also almost 50. In this episode, we're going to be talking about what seems to be a growing threat for outdoor fish keepers here in the U.S. This problem may surprise you. It's not the same old heron issues or raccoon or bear. No. In this episode, we're going to be talking about mink, the American mink, and how it could impact your koi pond, goldfish pond, trout pond, tilapia pond, depending on what type of pond you keep. And it's a big topic, too big for just me. So I'm going to be joined in this episode by an award-winning professional, Tim Wood. And Tim is owner of Aquatic Edge Consulting based out of Pennsylvania. Tim designs and builds constructed ponds, koi pond, water garden, water features, and he also has a natural pond and lake management division. Well, I'm very happy you took the time to come back to do the show. I think the last time that you were on, we were talking about pond predators in general. Tonight we're going to be talking about, really a pretty devastating predator, which is the American mink. So I guess you're my go-to guy for all the scary topics, the scary side of pond keeping. I'll hand it over to Tim Wood. Dealing with predators.
Maybe it's a good thing we're not doing a video webcast, and they can see how scary I look on video as well. I'll just keep it to the radio.
Funny, but it's like dealing with those kind of predators to pond keepers is difficult because they kind of treat us like we are their personal sushi bar, which is kind of what we want to avoid for the people who are listening and maybe be able to, I think, maybe even understand the mink a little bit more. And it's an interesting issue to me because it really seems like a fairly kind of relatively new issue, but I'm hearing about mink problems more and more, and they seem to be closer to home more and more. And I honestly don't recall the mink being much of an issue, let's say 10 years ago. I hear much more about it now. Do you feel like there's been an increase in mink sightings or issues?
I think so. I think I would agree with you, and I'm not sure the exact reason. I think that, nowadays in the last, and of course, the internet's been around for quite a while now, but, it seems that ponding and, water garden keeping in general is kind of on an upswing again. And with the amount of information that's out there, it's easier to share information. I don't know if it's more people are becoming aware of it and kind of know what to look for. So they know more about mink now, or if maybe mink are actually adapting and expanding their territories. I mean, they're all over the country, which, hardly anybody realizes aside from the Southwestern United States, where there's not a whole lot of water. Maybe the mink are expanding and that's what we're seeing. I'm not sure. What do you think about that?
Well, I kind of agree with you on a couple of points in the sense that people may just become more aware of the fact that a mink could be doing damage and preying upon their ponds. A lot of people, even when it comes to heron, which is a very common issue, they still don't. I get calls where people just don't know what's happening to their pond. All they know is that fish are disappearing and getting eaten. So it could just be exactly that people are just more aware of it and they know that mink are around. But I'm not sure where to go with it. I actually haven't had a personal issue with mink, but people, guys in my area who I keep in touch with, other pond builders, they've definitely had mink issues, direct and personal. But I guess it would probably be a good idea for us to kind of define what a mink is, because I think most people think of mink as, the luxurious mink coat, and they're these cute little critters. But the mink really is kind of a badass. There's two kinds of mink, the American mink and the European mink, and we'll focus on the American mink. But I think what we discussed can be applied to its European cousin. And so the mink, its Latin name is Neovison bison, and they are cute animals. So, that's true, but don't let that fool you, because they can be pretty devastating predators. So let's talk about what the mink is. It definitely is part of the weasel family, and it's a semi-aquatic animal. Now you just kind of touched on their range. What is the range? Where can we expect to find mink within the U.S.?
Well, pretty much almost everywhere in the U.S. I was just looking up at the their range map again before we got on. Actually, a few days ago when we were first planning on getting on, to make sure that I was still up to date on their current range, and it really hasn't changed much. There are mink in 90% of locations in the United States. The only place where they're really absent is like Arizona, New Mexico, areas where it's just basically desert. Any area that has natural water, whether it's rivers, lakes, farm ponds, wetlands, marshes, you're pretty much going to have mink. So with humans are kind of spreading out into all areas of the country, and we live back in the boonies, we live in the city, we live everywhere in between. It's not going to be too hard for a mink to travel from a river or a lake where where it currently lives, to just walk a few miles, over the course of, however long it would take. Maybe they're just kind of traveling around for a few weeks and scoping out new territories and come across a koi pond and start fishing that thing. They're everywhere. We just don't typically. The average person probably goes their entire life and never sees a mink, or probably even knows what a mink is. But they're everywhere almost. Yeah,
and I guess a lot of that would have to do with that. They are, well, first of all, they are nocturnal mostly, so they're going to be busy while at night doing their thing. They're very dark in coloration, so they're kind of dark brown or black in color, so they're hard to see even at night, and they're semi-aquatic. So a lot of people think of them, I guess when you think of, a mink, it's a weasel, you think of it as a dry land animal, but they have webbed feet.
Right.
I mean, they're very adept at being able to live in aquatic environments. They don't live in the water necessarily, but they're always around water. So you're right. I don't think people see a lot of them. The ones that are being, I guess, farmed for coats are exactly that. They're kind of kept in captivity on farms. So it's a weird perception, I think some people, including myself, until fairly recently, had about them. I never really thought of mink as being,
right.
I'm in New Jersey and you're in Pennsylvania. I never really thought of them as being a local critter, but they are for sure. And they're not endangered at all either. Their numbers are doing just fine. I think the European mink is protected, but the American mink is alive and well for sure.
Yeah, so, they are. There's plenty of them out there, and yeah, I think you're right. Most folks, when they think about a mink, they think about the mink coat, maybe the mink farming industry, but not realizing that a mink is a naturally occurring wild animal in the area where you live, more than likely, unless you live in Arizona. they're around. I like to refer to mink as, when customers ask me about, pond predators, and of course they usually start off with raccoons and, the neighborhood cats, and, not understanding that, those animals typically aren't going to get a whole lot of fish. Then maybe they think about the heron, and I bring up the mink, and and usually they're a little bit surprised. And I say, yeah, they're around, and I refer to the mink as a little, pond fishing ninja, because they are very hard to spot, for exactly the reasons you just stated about being nocturnal, and they're sly. They're very conscious to not be around humans, when humans are present. So they're sneaky little creatures, and they're pretty good at what they do.
And not very big. I mean, I think they max out at about 2 feet long, somewhere around there. You can recognize them. I mean, they look like a weasel or a ferret, maybe a bigger version of a ferret, kind of a shorter tail, a little stubby tail. So that's kind of how people, if you're not sure what you're seeing around your pond, that's a good way to identify them. And they do have a broad range, so we've talked about that. They're definitely in, the United States, Canada, not so much in the southern portions of the United States. And an individual territory for a mink can be up to 40 acres. So, I mean, that's for a small animal, that's a pretty broad area to use as their hunting grounds. And they are carnivorous, so they're definitely predators, full-on, straight-up predators. What are some of the things that they eat? What are some of the foods that, apart from our koi, what are some of the other foods that they go for?
Yeah, when they're not dining on our, koi that range in price from $5 to $500 or more, they're in their more natural environment, lakes and farm ponds, they love crayfish. They love to catch really, they love to hunt and catch other living aquatic animals, so whether that's crayfish or frogs, or if there's chipmunks or mice around the shoreline, they're going to go after them. Any baby birds that may be nested around there that are going to be low to the ground enough where the mink can reach. I think crayfish is probably one of the highest menu items on their on what they're feeding on. But just about anything that they can catch that is alive, they're going to eat it.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. Just about anything they can catch. They tend to hang out near rivers, swamps, ponds, lakes, marshes. So any animals you would see there, including birds, snakes, I mean, pretty much anything, muskrat, they will vigorously take on these larger creatures, which is impressive. In kind of preparing for the show, I was checking out some videos of mink on YouTube, and I came across a few where, I mean, they're attacking large swans, they're attacking rabbits, muskrats, I mean, vicious fighting, and they are just fearless. I mean, like most animals, but they are just absolutely fearless. So I think people, let's say you see a mink by your pond and you decide you're going to get it. First of all, you probably won't. But if you do, be careful, because they're not necessarily just going to run away. They could certainly turn around and, chomp onto you for a bit too.
Right.
So hopefully they'll stick to their
It's the whole cornered wild animal thing there, where we don't want to scare folks to think that there's murderous mink that are going to come out and start attacking us. But if you happen upon one and you scare it, and if it feels threatened, then it's going to turn and do what it needs to survive as a wild animal. So definitely want to be careful. Watch. If you have any, dogs or cats that are around the pond, if you suspect that you're losing some fish and you think that it might be related to mink, a great big Labrador, kind of a big, sturdy dog is going to probably scare them away. But any little dogs or little pets like that, you might want to kind of keep a close eye on them until you get that mink trapped or otherwise, taken care of and out of that area.
Yeah, I don't think a mink would think twice about taking on a small dog or a cat or anything like that. And there's not many predators for them either. I mean, there's fox and birds of prey, maybe coyotes and humans. I mean, there's not a plethora of other animals trying to eat them. Probably because they're
right.
such, aggressive little buggers. And on that point, you were saying, if your dog or something corners them, or if a person decides to corner them, like any animal, they're going to fight to the death, pretty much. But I found it interesting in some of the descriptions that mink will stand their ground, they growl, they hiss, and they can give off a really pungent odor, a lot like a skunk. They can't direct a spray like a skunk. But if you do, let's say, trap a mink and decide you're going to relocate this little guy, get ready for some serious stink inside your car, because they can give off a very, very, very strong odor. So people should be aware of that as well, which just adds to the difficulty of trying to control them, aquatic environments like we're talking about. And on a side note, when they're happy, they purr like a cat, which is interesting to me, being an owner of cats. How can people tell if they're having a mink issue? Are there any kind of telltale signs for that specific predator?
Yes, there are. The first thing that anybody really is going to notice when it comes to their koi pond is that they're going to go outside one day and realize, oh, there's seems to be a few less fish in my pond, in my water garden. Now, if you have a big koi pond with several dozen koi and a whole bunch of goldfish and stuff, it might take a long time to notice the population decline. But if you have a small pond with only maybe say 6 decent sized koi in it, you're going to notice if one of them's gone. The next day you're going to notice there's another one gone or another 2 gone. And that's going to be the first sign, is that you're losing fish. At that point, what you're going to want to do is try to determine, okay, is this a mink, or is it a heron, a great blue heron, which is the other most likely culprit aside from the mink.
Yeah.
And a good thing to do to find that out is to start searching around your pond. Look for any undercut boulders, overhanging ledges that are right on the edge of the pond or up away from the pond, close, within 50 feet or so. If you have a lot of boulder outcroppings in your landscape, look around there and see if you can find any freshly dug holes or crevices that are going up underneath a large boulder. That's what a mink is going to do to. A mink is going to go, and like you said, they're nocturnal. They're typically going out at night, doing their thing, grabbing a fish, and then they're going to take the fish out of the pond and go somewhere where they feel safe and eat it. So if you can find some sort of a burrow, don't just stick your hand right up in there. Maybe take a flashlight and try to get a visual cue there if there's actually a mink in there. You may find a burrow, but the mink's not there. But if you find an area where they feel safe and hidden, where they're going to consume their prey, you might also likely find the dead carcass of a fish. And if a mink has time to eat as much as they want, the carcass is pretty much going to be picked clean. You're just going to see bones there. Not going to see really anything else left at all. Mink are very good at getting every last bit of nutrition out of their prey. If it's winter time, or if you have any muddy areas around the pond, you can look for tracks. Go ahead and Google, anybody who's listening, Google mink tracks, and get a good visual idea of what they look like. But those are the 2 big things that they're going to tell you that you have a mink. Otherwise you can, a pretty neat little thing you can do, say, a lot of people are probably thinking right now, oh, well, I work during the day and I'm only, visiting my pond for maybe a few hours in the evening. I'm not home during the day to see if it's a heron or a mink. And, I don't have time to go searching around the woods and everything to try to find where a mink is hiding out at. you could always set up a trail camera like they use for deer hunting and, and turkey scouting, that sort of thing. Set up a trail camera or some other kind of webcam in your backyard and have it set right on your pond, and go back and check it and see if there's anything visiting your pond during the day. If you see a heron there, then, that's probably what's getting your fish. If you don't see any sign of anything else that's going on in your pond, yet you're still noticing some fish are missing, it's pretty good bet that you have a mink to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, and mink are one of the few predators as well that will actually kill more than they can eat. So if you're finding a carcass, or let's say you're finding a collection of carcasses in the area around your pond, like your fish are just disappearing, and then you find 3 or 4 of them stockpiled, that's a pretty telltale sign of a mink as well.
Exactly.
So that's something to watch. Whereas the heron basically swallows it whole and takes off. So the heron doesn't leave any mess. It doesn't leave anything around the pond. There's no sign of struggle. Whereas the mink, you can see that. Like you said, you can see tracks. You can, in the wintertime, or, if it's discernible enough during other seasons, you perhaps will see dragging marks where the mink will be dragging the fish away from the pond. And they'll definitely take on some pretty big fish, too.
Yep.
Maybe even bigger fish than a heron. Yeah, I mean, a heron might not be willing to eat as big a fish as a mink will. So that's something, too. If it's really big fish disappearing, super aggressive. I mean,
man, those things, they're like they're just a little oxymoron in the pond world. They are so stinking cute. You just look at a picture of a mink, and you're gonna want to pick it up and hold it and cuddle with it. But boy, you surely wouldn't want to do that in real life, because they'll tear you a new one.
Yeah. And I think people do actually feel exactly how you just described it. Evokes feelings of, oh, that's really cute. And some of, I saw some interesting stories and headlines of groups. I don't know any groups specifically, but PETA-like groups that would raid mink farms and let all the minks free because they don't want them being turned into coats. And in doing that, when you let, a couple thousand mink free into a countryside where the mink populations were normal, and now all of a sudden they've quadrupled, they've had really, really horrible effects. I mean, farms have gotten wiped out. They are serious predators, and they'll attack chickens, and they kind of really rampage over the countryside. I saw a couple different articles about that, where minks being freed from these mink farms have really had some serious side effects for like the local economy and just people living in the area. So it's as cute as you think they are. Sometimes it's better just to kind of leave things as they are and maybe not release 1,000 mink into your local neighborhood. Your pets are going to disappear. Your cats are going to disappear. Birds are going to disappear. Ground nesting birds. I mean, the ecology of the area gets heavily impacted. It really is some serious stuff. It's things that people really need to think about, even though they're just awful cute. So what can people do to try to protect against minks? I mean, that kind of would be the big issue. Like, once you know that you have a mink, you need to take action. What can people do? What should people do?
Yeah. So that's the big that's the $1 million question is how do we keep our fish safe from mink? And it's tough. Mink are they're very agile. They're very like I said, sneaky. They can wiggle their way in between cracks and bolt in rock work. If there's a little bit of a space there, they can get through. If you put a lot of folks will try putting a net over the pond to protect their fish from herons. I've seen mink be able to basically dig a little bit of a hole and
go right under it.
Sorry about that. I was having a call come through. I had to send it to voicemail. Mink can dig a little depression and get right underneath a net. And get in there and do their thing. A few things that we've found that can be pretty pretty effective at keeping mink from getting your fish. One of them is adding a pond dye to your water. Not everybody's going to love the idea of tinting their water, black or blue, because it makes it harder to see your pet koi. But it also makes it harder for the mink to see your koi as well.
Right.
So that's one of the most effective things you can do. Something else that can be done is to add some structure in the pond. Of course, we're talking about a little bit of a larger koi pond here. Putting in whether it's some milk crate type of things, or some larger drainage pipe with some rock around it, kind of make like a fish cave or a fish tunnel. And give the fish a little bit of an escape route, so that way they don't get cornered by a mink. They can go in and out of these holes and tunnels, and if they can make the mink continuously go around in circles, trying to get around the structure to get to the fish, it's going to make the mink more tired and a little bit less likely to try and continue to get all those fish. They might decide, oh, well, the pond I came from or the lake I came from, a quarter mile away, it was a heck of a lot easier to catch those crayfish and salamanders than it is to catch these fish. So they may leave. Those are two really big things that can be done.
Okay, so for somebody maybe on the front end who is intending to build a koi pond and maybe is aware that you have mink populations in the area, so you're saying basically, excuse me, a larger pond is kind of a defense mechanism. You can allow your fish to have plenty of room to escape. It's not a confined little area that makes it really easy for the mink to get into. And I think on that note, too, is that, the mink can tire out fairly easily if they have to go from one side of the pond to the other side, whereas once fish get on high alert, koi can be pretty lightning fast. They can go from one side of a pond to another in a blink of an eye. So that, I would agree, a larger pond is certainly going to give you a leg up on dealing with mink issues. Tying the water is a good idea. I've heard of people doing that as well. So netting basically does not work. That's not, it works against many other predators. It's not going to work for mink. And I've also heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I should say I read that the ultrasonic devices, which work for various other predators or critters, doesn't really work for the mink either. So, that's something that you can have in your arsenal for other predators, but the ultrasonic deterrence may not work. And trapping, which we kind of, I guess, talked about real quick a little bit earlier, trapping can work, but just be careful because they will, give off that smell, that very heavily musky smell, which can be a little off-putting. And you got to take them far away. If it has a 40-acre range, you got to really take it out of its own neighborhood to let it go again, wherever you're going to do that. So, yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
They're amazing little animals, but it's they are the real deal when it comes to being a predator in ponds.
Yeah. I was going to say, talking about the trapping thing, that is a great way to get rid of mink. But if you're going to take that route, I encourage anybody who's considering this to go online or look at your state's Department of Natural Resources or Fish and Game Commission, whatever it's called in whatever state you live in. Make sure that there's a law that allows the trapping of nuisance mink in a residential setting. There more than likely there's going to be, but mink are classified as a fur bearer. They're a mammal, and there is a state hunting season for mink in just about every state in the country. So you can't just go out to your local public pond or lake and trap mink anytime you want to. You have to abide by that season, but if it's at your own personal property, chances are they're going to give you an exception, allow you to do that, because you can claim that they're damaging your property, they're eating your pets and that sort of thing. So, but I would encourage anybody to confirm that before you go out and attempt to catch mink. And like you said, there are nuisance animal trappers, all over, professional contractors that are skilled at catching various animals. That's probably a good idea to utilize one of those guys, because they kind of know what they're doing in that regard. Because if you do end up catching a mink in a trap, and like I said, you got to be real careful where you put your fingers to carry that trap. They're gonna spray that musky, nasty scent that they have and ruin the back seat of your car. So yeah, there's certainly some things to consider. I did find a good website, when I was doing a little research. If anybody wants to just Google how to trap a mink, you'll likely come up pretty quickly to the website. I believe it was a company that makes traps, and I think it was called Have a Heart, I think was the name of the company, and they had a pretty good kind of step-by-step list of how some things to do and some things not to do, as far as what bait to try to use, where to set the trap, and some big do's and some big do nots. So it comes down to education, really. If anybody thinks they want to try to trap a mink, or anything for that matter, for something you're not used to doing, then you do a little research and make sure you do it right and do it safe and have a good result, and not a horror story to tell your grandkids of how you're missing your left pinky finger, along those lines.
Yeah, they call those minky fingers.
I set you up perfectly for that one.
Thank you. I just made that up. Well, that's excellent advice. Thank you so much for that. That really is. It's excellent advice. I hope people who are dealing with mink are learning a little bit more about it through this podcast, and how to deal with them, how to protect against them. And be sure, like Tim is suggesting, that you do check to see what local hunting laws are, trapping laws, all that kind of stuff. We don't want anybody getting in trouble. Not that I would tell on anybody if they trapped a mink and let it go somewhere, but you never know. So be very careful with all that stuff. And thanks so much, Tim, for joining me tonight. It was really informative. The time kind of just flies by here, but I really appreciate you making the time to come on. I know it's your busy season. I know you're out there doing your thing, and I really appreciate you coming in here and kind of giving your advice to the listeners and dealing with this issue, because mink are not going away. They're here to stay. There's a healthy population here in North America, and it's something that I think people are going to have to deal with from time to time. So thanks so much for coming on and for the great information.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. I'm honored to be a two-time guest on your webcast radio show. I think that's very cool. I love what you're doing with sharing this information about ponding and water gardening of all styles. I think that's great, and I wish you continued success with this endeavor.
All right, right on. Cool.
Off the air.
All right, man. Thank you so much, and I will catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, man. Have a good night.
You bet, Tim. Take good care. That was Tim Wood, everybody, from Aquatic Edge Consulting, an awesome pond professional out in Pennsylvania, great professional, talented pond builder. You can check him out online, and if you're listening from the Pennsylvania area, be sure to get in touch with Tim. Tim Wood, Aquatic Edge Consulting. So thanks for listening, everybody. I hope it gave you some insight into dealing with minks and your pond, your koi pond, water garden, goldfish pond. They can certainly be an issue from time to time for pond keepers, and hopefully this gave you a little better preparation in the event that you need to deal with them. So thanks for listening, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Gannon. You can find more Pond Hunter radio broadcasts on iTunes and Blog Talk Radio and on YouTube. I appreciate you all being here, and be sure to share your pond keeping lifestyle with everyone you can, it really is a great thing. It's a great hobby. It's a great lifestyle. I feel very blessed to be able to call this my profession. So we'll catch up with you next time, everybody. Keep it pondy.
You have been listening to the Pond Hunter radio broadcast on Blog Talk Radio with your host, Mike Gannon, the Pond Hunter. In the pursuit of all things aquatic, broadcasting Wednesday nights on Blog Talk Radio. The Pond Hunter, keeping it pondy for the aquatically obsessed.
That's right, everybody. The aquatically obsessed. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch you next time. Be good, everybody. Peace out.